On June 3, 2026, a sudden and severe meteorological anomaly struck the northern and eastern districts of Rome. The capital city awakened to an intense, torrential cloudburst that rapidly evolved into a severe supercell thunderstorm, bringing with it a highly localized but incredibly powerful tornado, known locally as a tromba d'aria. The vortex developed around 8 a.m. local time, tearing a path of destruction directly through highly populated urban residential zones, including Montesacro, Conca, Prati Fiscali, and Tufello, while surrounding historic quarters like Nomentano, Salario, and Perioli suffered from intense flooding and secondary storm damage. According to local emergency management agencies, including the Rome Fire Department, Vigili del Fuoco, and the local municipal police, Polizia Locale, the tornado caused extensive material damage, but miraculously resulted in no fatalities. Only one minor injury was officially confirmed during the immediate aftermath, alongside multiple cases of minor shock and bruises among citizens who found themselves caught directly in the vortex's path. However, the structural and infrastructural toll remains immensely severe. Over 50 massive trees collapsed, vehicles were crushed across multiple neighborhoods, public transit lines faced drastic delays, and critical sections of major roadways, including the urban highway Tangenziale Est, were completely shut down. The atmospheric instability that fueled this disaster had been building across the Italian peninsula over the previous 24 hours. The National Civil Protection Department, Protezione Civile, had already issued a yellow weather alert for storms across 14 Italian regions, predicting that deep, low-pressure systems colliding with unusually warm summer air currents would trigger localized severe weather. Witnesses across the three municipio, Montesacro, described the sudden transformation of the morning sky from a dark, foreboding gray into a swirling, black column extending from a rotating cloud base directly down to the asphalt. The tornado moved with extreme swiftness, completing its primary path of destruction in less than 30 minutes, leaving an apocalyptic landscape of shattered windows, uprooted pines, scattered roof tiles, and inverted waste bins in its wake. The localized nature of the tornado meant that while some parts of Rome experienced nothing more than a standard summer downpour, specific districts bore the absolute brunt of the atmospheric fury. The following subsections detail the conditions on the ground across the affected municipal zones. The area surrounding the Conca d'Oro Metro B1 station was one of the primary points of impact. The intense rotational wind speeds shattered the large glass windows of upper-floor apartments, raining shards of glass down onto the pavements below. Street infrastructure suffered immensely. Multiple newsstands, edicole, and outdoor market stalls were completely upturned and shattered by the winds. At the local outdoor market on Via Val di Lanzo, large metal frames, heavy market umbrellas, and wooden crates were lifted into the sky, swirling dangerously over the roofs before slamming down onto parked vehicles. One prominent market stall was hurled several meters through the air, completely crushing an unsuspecting stationary car. Perhaps the most visually shocking destruction occurred along the vital traffic artery of Via dei Prati Fiscali. The avenue, famous for its lining of mature stone pine trees, saw its landscape completely altered within minutes. Multiple massive pines were snapped at the trunk or entirely uprooted, falling directly across the multi-lane road. In one major incident on Via Val di Sangro, an enormous, uprooted tree crashed directly onto the structural canopy of an IP service station, collapsing the roof over the fuel pumps and causing an immediate evacuation of the area due to fire and structural collapse hazards. Drivers and motorcyclists trapped on the road were forced to abandon their vehicles, running on foot into nearby shops and apartment entrance halls to avoid being struck by flying debris and falling branches. In the nearby working-class neighborhood of Tufello, structural wind damage was heavily reported. The most significant architectural casualty was the Il Tirreno sports complex. The powerful updrafts of the tornado completely ripped the roof off the facility, scupperating the protective coverings of the indoor playing fields and scattering insulation material and metal sheets across the surrounding residential blocks. While these historic residential sectors were just outside the direct funnel path of the tornado, they bore the brunt of the accompanying supercell's downpour, experiencing massive flash flooding. Within 30 minutes, rain totals overwhelmed the city's ancient drainage systems. Water levels rose rapidly on primary streets, nearly covering the hoods of parked cars. Dozens of basements, subterranean garages, and ground-floor commercial storefronts were entirely inundated with muddy water, destroying inventory and prompting frantic salvage efforts by local business owners. The suddenness of the storm caused an immediate systemic failure across Rome's vulnerable northern transit network. Commuters heading into the city center found themselves entirely trapped as major roads and transit tracks became impassable. The Tangenziale Est, a critical highway circling Rome's interior, suffered total gridlock immediately after the storm hit. Just past the crucial Via Salaria interchange, a massive tree collapsed across the entire width of the highway, blocking all lanes in both directions. The falling tree struck several moving vehicles. Miraculously, the occupants escaped without severe injuries, though the vehicles themselves sustained heavy structural damage. Due to the accumulation of downed limbs and severe standing water near the Via dei Campi Sportivi zone, municipal authorities were forced to entirely close significant segments of the highway, forcing thousands of vehicles into the narrow secondary streets of North Rome, which were already congested by the localized flooding. The Municipal Transit Authority, ATAC, issued emergency updates as bus routes throughout the northeastern quadrant collapsed into chaos. The physical blockage of Via dei Prati Fiscali and surrounding intersections meant that nearly 20 major surface transit lines suffered extreme delays or were forced into emergency detours. The localized physical violence of the tornado didn't just affect the streets. It heavily impacted the local electrical grid. High winds snapped overhead power cables, and falling branches severed connections to localized power transformers. Multiple blocks throughout Montesacro and Conca reported total power blackouts that lasted for hours. Furthermore, multiple traffic light systems across key intersections were knocked offline or physically twisted out of alignment by the winds, creating highly hazardous driving conditions that required manual intervention by traffic police. The response to the disaster required an all-hands-on-deck mobilization of Rome's emergency services. The Rome Fire Department, Vigili del Fuoco, was immediately inundated with calls for assistance, facing a backlog of over 40 urgent interventions within the first hour of the storm's passage. Specialized rescue units were deployed to handle complex tactical challenges. In Via Valsavaranche, a dedicated team from the Alpine and River Rescue Squad, Soccorso Alpino Fluviale, SF, was urgently called to a residential building at number 95. A large brick chimney had been severely destabilized by the tornado's winds and was teetering precariously, threatening to collapse onto the terrace below and the public street. SAF operators meticulously secured the structure using high-angle rope systems, while local police completely cordoned off all pedestrian and vehicular traffic beneath the building to avoid potential fatalities. Simultaneously, crews from the Servizio Giardini di Roma Capitale, the city's park and garden maintenance division, deployed with heavy chainsaws and cranes to systematically cut up and remove the massive fallen stone pines blocking Via dei Prati Fiscali and the Tangenziale Est. The trash management utility AMA also mobilized teams to clear thousands of scattered garbage bins, plastic debris, and broken glass from public spaces to allow for a safe return to normality. As the afternoon progressed and the initial shock faded, local political leaders and community figures began addressing the structural vulnerabilities exposed by the disaster. The president of the 3rd Municipio, Montesacro, Paolo Emilio Marchione, released a comprehensive official statement summarizing the situation and outlining the immediate steps being taken by the local government. A violent tornado has severely impacted several areas of our municipality today. Fortunately, we are not reporting any grave injuries to our citizens, though some individuals have suffered minor consequences. The primary impact has been an immense shock to our community, alongside severe and widespread damage to both private properties and public infrastructure. Currently, there are extensive emergency operations underway to secure the territory and restore safety. We estimate that at least 50 mature trees have collapsed across our roads, alongside severe damage to traffic light networks, street signage, and public sidewalks. I urge all residents to practice the absolute maximum level of caution during their travels today, whether traveling on foot or by car. President Marchion also expressed deep gratitude to the responding entities, praising the tireless efforts of the Vigili del Fuoco, the Polizia Locale, the Civil Protection Volunteers, the Servizio Giardini, and AMA workers who operated continuously under hazardous conditions to clear the streets. Meanwhile, a violent meteorological system characterized by massive hail, torrential downpours, and gale-force wind gusts has ripped through the heart of the Emilia-Romagna region in northern Italy, triggering severe infrastructure damage, shattering local agricultural assets, and paralyzing transportation networks. The extreme weather front, which climaxed on Tuesday afternoon, June 2, 2026, prompted emergency services to deploy dozens of rescue units to handle hundreds of critical calls. As local authorities assess the catastrophic impact, the Regional Environmental and Civil Protection Agency, RPI, alongside the National Protezione Civile, has sustained a yellow meteo alert across extensive swathes of the region due to persistent hydraulic and hydrogeological vulnerabilities. The flash storm, arriving with unexpected ferocity following a period of shifting thermal patterns, transformed streets into rivers of ice and mud within a matter of minutes, while local emergency centers confirm, with immense relief, that no human casualties or significant physical injuries have been reported. The economic and structural damages are projected to scale into millions of euros. The provinces of Bologna, Ferrara, and Modena bore the primary brunt of the supercell-like storm trajectory, leaving local municipalities scrambling to clear debris, restore power lines, and secure damaged architecture. In the province of Bologna, the fire department, Vigili del Fuoco, faced an unprecedented surge in distress calls, managing over 400 separate emergency interventions in less than 24 hours. The low-lying plains north of the provincial capital bore witness to the most concentrated physical devastation. The municipalities of Crevalcore, San Giovanni in Persiceto, San Pietro in Casale, and Molinella were subjected to a barrage of large-scale hail, accompanied by cyclonic wind gusts. In the fraction of Massumatico, located within the San Pietro in Casale municipality, the storm assumed destructive proportions. Strong straight-line winds, or local downbursts, completely rent apart industrial warehouses, ripped away heavy metallic roofing sheets, and shredded reinforced commercial gazebos. Flying debris from collapsing roofs shattered nearby windows and pierced through residential structures. Concurrently, across towns like Altedo, Calderara di Reno, and Castello d'Argile, the primary hazard stemmed from a massive tree fall crisis. Hundreds of mature secular trees and utility poles were snapped or entirely eradicated from the soil, crushing parked vehicles, severing low-voltage electrical distribution grids, and rendering vital municipal roads entirely impassable. In a particularly tense incident near Castello d'Argile, between the hamlets of Mascarino and San Giorgio di Piano, emergency rescue teams had to use chainsaws and heavy machinery to extricate residents who were completely trapped inside their homes due to massive fallen trees blocking every exit point. Further east, the province of Ferrara faced dual emergencies: severe hail accumulation and sudden urban flash flooding. The Ferrara command of the Vigili del Fuoco registered approximately 70 intense interventions, focusing heavily on the municipalities of Cento, Argenta, and Ostellato, alongside the eastern maritime peripheries. In Cento and the neighboring district of Renazzo, the storm delivered a catastrophic rain volume, dropping roughly 45 millimeters of water in a brief 30-minute window. This immense volume completely overwhelmed the municipal stormwater drainage and sewage networks. Within minutes, the historical centers and suburban sectors experienced flash inundations. Water breached defense barriers, flooding scores of basements, subterranean garages, and ground-floor commercial storefronts. In Ostellato, the situation was worsened by a heavy hailstorm that battered residential roofs before the storm system shifted eastward toward the Adriatic coast, forcing holidaymakers and beachgoers to rapidly flee the shorelines. Transportation in the province was thrown into chaos when a massive tree collapsed directly across the busy Ferrara-Porto Garibaldi highway link, Raccordo Autostradale, near the Kona interchange. The fallen trunk and associated branches totally blocked the eastbound lanes toward the coast, generating extensive traffic gridlock and forcing law enforcement to execute emergency diversions for several hours. The province of Modena did not escape the storm's path, with emergency teams logging at least 65 urgent rescue interventions. A mix of dense hail and sudden microburst winds swept across the provincial territory, targeting both agricultural belts and key arterial infrastructure. Along major thoroughfares, most notably the Nuova Estense Highway, large branches and structurally compromised trees collapsed directly onto the asphalt. Several moving vehicles were struck by descending debris, causing extensive vehicular damage and terrifying motorists, though miraculous evasive maneuvers prevented severe injuries. Municipal teams worked through the night alongside civil protection volunteers to clear the debris and restore safe driving conditions. To understand the sheer violence of the event, meteorologists point to the sharp atmospheric contrasts that collided over the Po Valley. Following an unseasonably warm spell that loaded the lower atmosphere with high thermal energy and humidity, a fast-moving, colder Atlantic low-pressure trough breached the alpine barrier. This setup acted as a catalyst for a series of highly organized convective supercells. As the cold, dense air overrode the warm, moisture-laden air masses close to the ground, violent updrafts developed. These updrafts recycled raindrops multiple times above the freezing level, growing ice pellets into substantial hail before the weight of the ice overcame the ascending currents. The resulting downdrafts and downbursts, localized columns of sinking air that spread out destructively upon hitting the ground, were responsible for the 100+ kilometers per hour wind gusts that tore through industrial hangars in Montesacro and leveled tree lines across Bologna. The violent convective cell directly impacted regional aviation, severely disrupting operations at the Bologna-Guglielmo Marconi International Airport. As the core of the thunderstorm system positioned itself directly over the runway, horizontal visibility dropped to near zero values, accompanied by severe low-level wind shear and intense lightning. Air traffic controllers and airline captains were forced to suspend landing operations to ensure passenger safety. Multiple inbound European and domestic flights were forced into holding patterns before executing official diversions to alternative hubs, primarily Pisa Airport and alternative northern fields. Outbound flights experienced cascading delays extending over several hours, leaving thousands of passengers stranded inside the terminals as ground crews temporarily halted baggage handling and refueling operations due to the extreme risk of lightning strikes. In the sub-regions of Bassa Romagna and around Faenza, including the heavily hit municipalities of Bagnara di Romagna, Massa Lombarda, Fruges, and Castel Bolognese, the timing could not have been worse. Apricots, which were in the critical phase of ripening, were shredded on the branches. In Castel Bolognese, agricultural inspectors report catastrophic crop losses exceeding 80% for primary varieties, including plums, apricots, kiwis, persimmons, cherries, and regional vineyards. The storm also devastated staple crops like maize, wheat, soy, and processing tomatoes. Fields of barley and wheat that were nearly ready for the summer harvest were completely flattened, allettamento, by the combined force of the rain and wind, making mechanical harvesting nearly impossible. Young maize stalks were snapped or stripped of their leaves, severely impacting the region's silage and grain yields. Colderedi has mobilized its technical networks across the provinces to officially map the damaged perimeters, quantify the financial losses, and initiate the administrative paperwork required to trigger emergency state aid and activate agricultural calamity funds.